Barron Trump tried to publicly challenge Morgan Freeman on live TV. What he got instead was a calm, brutal reality check that hit with the kind of weight only a man like Freeman could deliver, leaving Barron reconsidering everything. The cameras didn't miss a second. The auditorium wasn't tense, not exactly. It was more like it was holding its breath. Everyone sensed something unscripted was about to unfold. They just didn't know from where. Then Barron Trump stepped up to the mic. It wasn't just the name, though that carried its usual shadow. It was the posture, the poise, the illusion of readiness. Shoulders up, chin out, voice steady. He came not to stumble, or so he believed. The town hall was live, coast to coast. A slick broadcast staged at the Gerald Ford Civic Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. On stage sat a panel of lawmakers, community leaders, and cultural icons. And third from the left, in a sharp suit, exuding a calm presence with eyes like a lighthouse cutting through fog, sat Morgan Freeman. He wasn't leaning back. He wasn't smiling. He was listening. Barron, just 18, fresh diploma in hand, propped up by a rising tide of conservative youth media, had been prepped. Hit your line. Stay composed. Don't let him intimidate you. He cleared his throat, locked eyes with Freeman. "Mr. Freeman," he began, "I've followed your public commentary, your speeches, your interviews. It's hard to take some people seriously when they use outrage as a branding tool." The room didn't gasp. It just paused. One of those still moments where the air gets thin and nobody blinks. Freeman didn't move. Not an inch. He didn't rebut. Didn't perform. He just tilted his head slightly, the way only someone who's heard this kind of challenge 100 times can. And then, in that unmistakably warm, gravelly voice, smooth as aged whiskey, he responded, "Son, it's always interesting how the folks most upset by how I say something got nothing to say about why I had to say it in the first place." That's when the energy shifted. Not loud, just deeper. People leaned in, but Freeman wasn't done. His words didn't slice to hurt. They sliced to reveal. He spoke about the boys and girls he mentored in neighborhoods no one broadcasts from. He told a story about a 12-year-old black boy in South Central, suspended for talking back, only for it to come out later the teacher had been mocking him for speaking in AAVE. "That's not outrage," Freeman said. "That's what happens when a man uses every tool he has to lift up those nobodies listening to. You call it branding. I call it survival. And the real question you should be asking is why so many folks still need defending in the first place." Barron blinked. This wasn't in the script. He tried to interject. "I'm just saying," Freeman cut in, quiet, controlled, but unshakable. "No, son, you're not just saying, you're performing. And this ain't the kind of stage where I hand out applause for weak material." There was no explosion from the crowd. That would have been cheap. Instead, they sat still, watching a boy with a famous name get stripped down, not with insults, but with intellect, with presence, with truth. By the time the segment ended, the internet was ablaze. TikTok, Twitter, Threads, every group chat lit up. The headlines came fast, but they missed the depth. This wasn't a takedown. It wasn't a dunk. It was what happens when someone used to winning rooms walks into one where the room doesn't care who you are. Freeman didn't insult him. He didn't raise his voice. He exposed the hollowness of the argument. And he did it all with the patience of a man who's seen things, fought systems, worked in shadows, and climbed walls built to keep men like him out. Somewhere in the middle of Freeman's reply, Barron cracked. You could see it. His mouth twitched like he wanted to speak, but nothing came. Because what do you say to a man who doesn't care about your last name, who's been doing the work long before the cameras showed up? But this moment didn't just drop out of nowhere. It was months in the making. The town hall had been carefully orchestrated, billed as Voices of Tomorrow, a national Gen Z policy forum designed to close the growing rift between youth and Washington. Producers wanted spark, authenticity, something raw, not sanitized debates, not empty applause. So they did what networks always do when they want fireworks. They stacked the stage with high-profile figures and big personalities. Then they brought in carefully selected Gen Z speakers to challenge them on air. That's how Freeman got pulled in. A cultural heavyweight, a truth-teller, a man who never needed a political title to move rooms. His presence was deliberate. He didn't come for show. He came with receipts, with clarity, with purpose. And then there was Barron. His invitation sparked controversy from day one. He wasn't a policymaker, not a college student, but he was rising fast in the right-wing youth scene. Podcasts, live streams, campus events. He had the buzz. But what he didn't have was what Freeman had. Decades of fire-tested wisdom and the ability to walk into any room and shift its gravity without raising a single decibel. That made all the difference. Youth conferences usually happen behind closed doors. Panels, prescripted questions, polite applause. Some producers thought putting Morgan Freeman in one was a gamble. But to others, that name wasn't just safe, it was gold. It guaranteed attention. The pitch was simple. Bring in Barron Trump as the voice of young conservatism. Match him across from a legend, and let sparks fly. Barron agreed, reportedly against the advice of a few seasoned family advisors who warned him, policy forums aren't rallies. People don't cheer sound bites. They challenge them. But Barron was confident, maybe too confident. After all, he'd grown up in rooms where people nodded before he finished speaking. This wasn't that room. The forum took place in Grand Rapids, but it wasn't about Michigan. It ranged wide. Climate change, criminal justice, digital rights, speech laws. 4 public figures were on stage, taking questions from a sharp youth panel. And among them, unshaken and deliberate, sat Morgan Freeman. He wasn't dodging anything. He never does. Barron's moment didn't come right away, but his presence did. Scribbling on a pad, whispering to a handler, glancing toward the camera like it owed him something. If you were watching closely, you could see it. He was loading a moment. Elijah Moreno, 19, an organizer out of Fresno, seated next to him, leaned over during a break and quietly said something like, "Let the convo breathe a bit." Barron waved him off with a smirk. "I got this." The cameras missed that exchange, but people in the audience didn't. Meanwhile, Freeman was holding court like a man who's done it before. Asked about the tension between police unions and reform advocates, he didn't dodge or dilute. He didn't play for claps. He broke down contracts, structures, review boards, cool, clear, controlled. Then came Barron's moment. He wasn't brought in to be a disruptor, but that's what he decided to be. Why? Ego, pressure, maybe the performance itch. No one knows, but when he grabbed the mic and set his sights on Freeman, it wasn't a question. It was a move. A short speech built for virality. Barron took aim at Freeman's reputation for outrage, questioned his effectiveness, and implied that emotion, not substance, defined his work. It was sharp, clearly rehearsed, and laced with the kind of smug confidence that plays well on certain clips. The room didn't boo, but something shifted. Freeman didn't move, not right away. He just watched. And in that silence, something came through the screen. Even to viewers at home, this wasn't a clash of equals. This was a boy trying to perform power, and a man who had power and didn't need to show it. The camera slowly tightened on Barron. The moderator gave a polite nod. Barron adjusted his jacket sleeve, like his father used to, like it meant something. He stepped forward, his voice steady, his delivery clean. He paused in all the right places. "Mr. Freeman," he said, "I've read your work. I've followed your commentary. But don't you think there's a difference between fighting for justice and being addicted to conflict? Sometimes it seems like you care more about being loud than being right." He let it hang, just like his prep team probably told him. That pause, that was the viral moment. The posture, the smirk, the subtle blink. He thought he'd nailed it, except he hadn't. Freeman didn't reach for a mic, didn't lean back in his chair. He just looked at him, not with anger, not with ego, just disappointment. That quiet kind that sinks deeper than rage. Then, softly, firmly, he leaned forward. "Barron," he said. "No title, no theatrics, just the name. The problem with speaking before you've lived is that you confuse volume with vision." There it was. No yelling, no cutting, just wisdom wrapped in precision. Barron tried to jump in, tried to regain control, but Freeman kept going, never raising his voice. "You think this is about being loud? Let me tell you something." He locked eyes with him, unblinking. "When I was doing this work, when I was sitting in real courtrooms, in real communities, I watched judges tell young black girls they were too emotional after being assaulted. I've seen how silence is used like a weapon, not just to shut people up, but to shut people out." He paused, not for effect, for weight. "So, no, I don't quiet down to make people comfortable." You could hear a pin drop. He didn't need applause. He didn't ask for understanding. He delivered clarity. And in that moment, Barron, and everyone else watching, realized they weren't witnessing a debate. They were watching a lesson. Barron didn't speak, not right away. So, Freeman kept going. "You've lived in a world," he said, voice steady, "that gives you the benefit of the doubt before you even open your mouth. Most of the people I stand for, they don't even get the benefit of being heard. No anger, just truth." And it landed. "So when you call it outrage," he continued, "what I hear is you're uncomfortable because I refuse to shrink." He looked at him, unwavering. "And I'm not shrinking." From somewhere in the audience, a single audible broke the silence. Not mocking, not sarcastic, just one of those involuntary human sounds people make when truth walks in the room without knocking. Barron stood still. This wasn't what he prepared for. His words had been sharp, sure, but they weren't deep. They didn't carry weight. He looked toward the moderator, unsure whether to push back, step down, or just stay frozen. No help came. Finally, a little more stiff than confident, Barron said, "I respect your position, but I still think tone matters in public service." That's when Freeman delivered the line, the one that would echo online for weeks, stitched into reels, dropped into debates, quoted over moody piano instrumentals. "You care about tone because you don't know what it feels like to need content." No shouting, no finger pointing, just that sharp, quiet rhythm, the kind of delivery that slides past partisanship and lands in your gut. And in that moment, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone watching who'd ever been told they were too loud, too much, too emotional, when in truth, they were just fed up with being ignored. But the real shift in the room came with what Freeman said next. He didn't flinch, didn't fidget. His voice carried weight, not because it was loud, but because it didn't try to sell anything. He wasn't angling for applause. He was sharing a life that Barron hadn't lived. "Tone," Freeman repeated, softer now, like the word itself had missed the point. "You brought up tone, but tone didn't get me through night shifts in law school. Tone didn't help me sit with parents who lost a child in a traffic stop. And it sure as hell didn't help me stay calm the day a DA told a teenage girl she was acting grown because she wore lip gloss to school." His hand moved, not for drama, but intention, one resting lightly on the table, the other tracing a small arc in the air as he made his point. "Tone," he said, "is what people reach for when they don't want to deal with the substance. I'm not here to sound nice. I'm here to tell the truth." Barron didn't interrupt. Was it respect? Discomfort? Strategy? Hard to say, but something in him shifted. He wasn't leaning forward anymore. His posture stayed alert, but his energy softened, like someone waiting for permission to breathe. Freeman turned toward the audience, not away from Barron, but beyond him. "We've reached a place," he said, "where young people are invited into rooms like this, but only if they're polite, only if they nod, smile, say thank you for crumbs." A pause. That's not dialogue, that's theater. A few students in the back exchanged glances, not in defiance, in recognition. They knew they'd lived that tightrope, where being heard meant being agreeable, measured, palatable. Freeman didn't flinch. "I want young people to speak. I want you to challenge me, but don't walk in with scripted punches and expect me to flinch." He looked back at Barron. Direct, not aggressive, just unshaken. "I've buried friends because of failed systems. You've been featured in magazines for being tall." It didn't land like a clapback. It landed like a eulogy for delusion. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. His voice never rose. His message never wavered. His delivery, every breath, every pause, was a masterclass in control. You didn't hear Freeman speak. You felt him teach. Barron finally opened his mouth again. "I think I see your point," he said. The words hovered between admission and retreat. Freeman smiled. Not smug, not triumphant, just knowing. The kind of smile that says, "You may not agree yet, but now you're listening." "You don't have to agree with me," he said. "But if you're going to be here, really be here, bring something real, not rehearsed." And with that, something shifted in the room. People who'd walked in wearing bias-like armor started to shed it, because this wasn't about left or right anymore. It wasn't about party lines or famous bloodlines. It was about who had lived the weight of their words and who was borrowing them from others. For the first time that night, Barron stood not as a speaker, but as a student. And Freeman, he didn't gloat, didn't take a victory lap. He folded his hands quietly, waited for the next question. But while that silence hung in the air, something else was happening. Something that would echo far beyond that auditorium. It wasn't the volume of his voice. It was the weight of his memory. The moderator shifted the program back toward the rest of the panel. Tried, anyway. But the air in the room hadn't returned to neutral. The crowd wasn't noisy. They were locked in, eyes tilted forward, heads darting between Freeman and Barron like a tennis match that had stopped pretending to be about points. And then, with no prompt, no cue, Freeman leaned back just slightly and began to build. "I wasn't always on stages like this," he said, his voice calm, like still water over deep stone. "I wasn't born into networks. No built-in platform, no cameras. I spent years telling stories nobody wanted to hear." The room fell silent again. Not out of politeness, out of gravity. Then came the story. "There was a case," he said. "Marcus Bellamy, 8th grader, suspended, charged. Why? Because he yanked his backpack away when a school officer grabbed it." He paused, let it breathe. "They said he was being aggressive. What he was really doing was trying to hold onto a notebook. You know what was inside?" A longer pause, then softer. "Drawings, anime, a sketch of Sonic the Hedgehog. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't rush. He let it land. The system didn't care. Context didn't matter. He was processed, labeled, made to feel disposable. At 13, you could almost hear people blink. His mom worked 2 jobs, slept in her car during the trial just to make the hearings. Then Freeman looked up. Not accusing, just clear. "You want to talk about outrage?" He shook his head. "Try whispering your way through that." No one dared cut in. Not the moderator, not Barron, not even the staffers near the booth, because it wasn't a speech anymore. It was testimony. He kept going. "There's this narrative," he said, "that black men who speak plainly, who speak with weight, are angry, that we're aggressive, that we're performative. But here's the truth." He adjusted in his seat just slightly and tilted toward Barron. "Not confrontational, but intentional. Try surviving in rooms that weren't built for you. Rooms where being calm gets you ignored and being direct gets you labeled. Then tell me how much tone matters." Barron didn't move. He didn't need to. Everyone could see it. He'd walked in expecting a sparring match. But this was a lesson in restraint. Fire held back so it wouldn't burn the whole damn building down. Then Freeman leaned in again. Not too close, just close enough. "You want to lead? Then ask better questions. Not the kind that go viral, the kind that keep you up at night." He looked straight through him. "Ask yourself, who would you lose votes for? What would you risk your career for? And if the answer is nothing, then you're not ready." That line didn't land with applause. It settled heavy, like truth always does when it refuses to entertain. Even the older guests, congressional aides, retired educators, started shifting in their seats, not because they were uncomfortable, but because they recognized what was happening. This wasn't a takedown. It wasn't revenge. It was mentorship wrapped in heat, delivered without sugar. And it didn't stop with Barron. "I'm saying this to every young person watching," Freeman continued, opening the moment. "Not just the ones with famous last names. Don't waste your voice trying to sound important. Use it to say something important." Then finally he sat back, folded his hands, and let the silence stretch out until it found its own ending. The moderator looked stunned. Not because he disagreed, but because moments like this weren't supposed to happen on live TV, not with commercial breaks cued and lower thirds waiting to roll, but nobody cut to black. Barron adjusted his mic, looked down, then up. "I didn't mean any disrespect," he said. His voice was lower now, measured. "I thought I was prepared. I see I missed something." Freeman didn't gloat, didn't smile wide, just nodded, calm. "Then take that," he said, "and grow. The mic doesn't make you right. Listening might." And by the time the next panelist cleared their throat, the internet had already chosen. Not just a winner, a weight. Even in a whisper, it was clear whose voice had carried farther. The tone of the event had changed, not just between Freeman and Barron, but across the whole room. What began as a scripted policy forum had cracked open into something raw, unexpected, and true. And Barron Trump, who had walked in ready to perform, was now processing. The tension hadn't disappeared. It had evolved. Freeman's words hadn't just landed. They lingered. His stories weren't talking points. They were lived experiences wrapped in names, documents, and pain that no one could debate away. There was no comeback for that. No statistic, no prepared retort. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was experience face-to-face with entitlement. Barron sat differently now. Still upright, still composed, but something in his posture had softened. The edge was gone. So was the gleam. What was left was something closer to humility. The moderator tried to reset, move the conversation toward digital privacy laws, but no one really heard him. Not yet. Because the room was still carrying what just happened. It wasn't the volume of his voice. It was the weight behind every word. By the time the moderator tried to pivot to the next topic, something had shifted. Not just on stage, but in the air. The crowd wasn't restless. They were locked in, like they'd just witnessed something they weren't supposed to. Something too real for TV. Clips were already spreading online, but it wasn't the flashy moments. It was the silences, the stillness. Freeman saying, "The mic doesn't make you right." Barron whispering, "I see I missed something." Those fragments traveled not because they were dramatic, but because they were true, unfiltered, rare. Back on stage, the moderator asked carefully, "Would you like to respond?" Barron hesitated, and that alone said everything. 15 minutes earlier, he'd walked in ready to win. Now, "I think I came here trying to sound smart," he said slowly. "But maybe I should have come here to ask better questions." No applause, just a hush. The kind you only get when people are actually listening. Freeman didn't respond. He didn't have to. The lesson had already landed and was being received. This wasn't about left or right anymore. It was about what happens when someone shows up expecting a performance and instead meets presence. What Freeman offered wasn't a takedown. It was a blueprint, a masterclass in how to hold the line without breaking it, how to teach without demeaning. And what Barron gave, whether he meant to or not, was just as rare. He stayed. He didn't storm out. He didn't double down. He sat in the discomfort and let it teach him something. Later that night, Barron quietly posted a short clip from his phone. "Last night I tried to make a point and got taught a better one," he said. "You don't have to agree with someone to learn from them, and I learned something." No music, no edits, just a sentence, and maybe the beginning of something. Freeman didn't repost it, didn't gloat, but his team released a single line. "Public spaces work best when people show up ready to listen. That includes us all." No branding, no campaign push, just clarity. What happened on that stage wasn't a debate. It was growth in real time, the kind you don't often see, especially not on camera. Barron came in ready to win a room. But what made the moment matter is that he let himself be changed by it. And Freeman, he didn't win by volume. He won by depth. No one shouted. No one walked out. But somehow, everything moved. So maybe the lesson isn't about who had the best line or the most claps. Maybe it's this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "I missed something." And the most powerful thing you can do is listen like you mean it.